He began the Saturday morning Dave's shoelace broke. Began like this. Dave and Morley were on their way to the market. The idea was to go early and get back before Sam woke up. They were running late, of course. Morley at least 3 steps ahead of Dave. And he could feel her frustration beginning to simmer. He was hurrying to catch up. He was trying to make it to the door before the simmer became a boil. He had to run upstairs for his wallet, and then after he'd done that, he couldn't find the car keys anywhere. He looked at Morley and grinned painfully. He said, I'm sure I left them here. He was pointing at the basket by the back door. Of course, he hadn't left them in the basket by the back door. Anyone could see that. And if you knew him, you could tell by the way he said, I'm sure I left them here, that he wasn't sure at all. That he didn't have a clue where he'd left them. The keys, it turned out, were upstairs in the laundry basket, in the pocket of jeans he was wearing on Thursday, which is the last time he drove the car. That took about 5 more minutes to work out. Morley waiting by the door through all this, through the discovery that they were missing and the searching and the working out, waiting still when he came down the stairs for the 3rd time with the keys in his triumphant little hand. I have no idea what they were doing there, he said, genuinely mystified. And then he stepped into his sneakers and he sat on the stairs to do them up. Go on, he said, as if she hadn't been waiting since this began. I'll be right out, he said. And that's when he pulled the laces tight, and that's when the left lace snapped. And that is the exact moment this story began. That moment by the back door when Dave's shoelace broke, and Dave said, just a minute, and he ran to the basement and he grabbed the very first thing that he saw down there that had laces, which happened to be a pair of skates. And he ripped the long waxed lace out of one of the skates and he stuffed it in his pocket and he tripped out to the car, one shoe half on and half off. When they got to the market, Dave headed for the little cafe by the entrance, and he sat there and he threaded the hockey lace into his sneaker. When he was finished, there was a lot of lace left over. So he did a double knot and he stuffed the leftover lace into the shoe and he was good to go. Sam was awake when they got home, but it was Saturday and he was watching television, not even close to feeding himself. So technically they made it in time and no harm was done. 2 weeks went by. It was a Friday, twilight. That sweet moment of indifference between day and night. Dave and Morley and Sam, sitting in the back seat, were in the sweetest place you can be for that great gray cosmic sigh. They were on the road, in between here and there, trying to decide where they were going to pull off the highway for the night. I don't care, said Sam, as long as it has a pool. They were in upstate New York on a spur-of-the-moment road trip. Up ahead on the outskirts of one of those little highway towns that you never heard of, there was a motel with a vacancy sign all lit up. Blue and green neon flickering against a purple sky. Sam looked up from the back seat and read the sign and gasped. And then he began to read it out loud. Look, he said, indoor, and Morley cut him off and finished his sentence for him. Pool, she said. It means pool, indoor pool. The L has burned out. Sam said, can we take a picture? The totem motor in. Indoor pool. Dave pulled in. 5 minutes later, Dave and Sam were heading for the pool. There was already a kid in the water. He was older than Sam, but he was acting a lot younger. He was loud and splashy. He was obnoxious. The moment Dave walked into the room, the kid got out of the water and ran across the pool deck and jumped back into the water right in front of Dave. Cannonball. Hey, said Dave, jumping back. Too late, he was already soaked. The kid ruined their swim. And Sam took off. Dave lingered behind and waited for Sam to get out of earshot, and as soon as he walked over to the kid, leaned over and said, "You know what?" He said, "You are old enough to know better." Next morning, Dave woke up first. He lay in bed for a while, but Morley wasn't stirring. After a few minutes, he propped himself up on an elbow and whispered in his sleeping wife's ear. He said, "I'm going to go have a walkabout. I'll bring you a coffee." Morley mumbled, "Don't hurry." And she rolled over and went back to sleep. Dave pulled on the pants and T-shirt he was wearing the night before and padded to the door. And when he got to the lobby, saw a girl behind the desk wearing a brown tunic. "Morning," she said, cheery Saturday smile. She pointed down the hall. "Complimentary coffee in the Crockett room." Dave set off past the elevators and the rack with the brochures, past the dark bar where he and Morley had had a beer by the fireplace the night before, past the pool, and there was the Crockett room, a right turn after the fitness center. He had to use his room key to open the fitness center door. He went in backwards, pushing the door with his hip, coffee in one hand and a surprisingly delicious cinnamon bun in the other. Room was bigger than you would have expected, small nonetheless, a couple of Nautilus machines, a rowing machine, and one of those, whatever you call them, running machines. Dave had never tried one. And he wasn't about to now. Except it was early, and no one else was around. So he climbed tentatively up onto the black treadmill. That's what you call them, treadmills. He balanced his coffee on the arm of the machine. There was an LED control panel with a daunting number of choices: age, weight, aerobic, anaerobic, fitness level. What did that mean? They make these things unnecessarily complicated, thought Dave. They should just have on and off. Dave took a sip of his coffee and stared at the screen. Personalized program. Now that was promising. He reached out and pressed personalized program. And a voice said, "Good morning, Brendan." And then the belt he was standing on lurched, and what was left of his coffee flew out of his hand and splashed onto the control panel. And then the voice, which Dave now realized was coming out of the machine, was saying in 10, it was saying in 9, 8, 7. Little too much was happening at once. And it was all happening a little too quickly. The treadmill was speeding up and making Dave walk a little faster than was comfortable. And he was puffing a bit and scanning the control panel as he puffed. He was looking for the off button. There must be an off button. When suddenly there was a bang, and hey, someone had grabbed Dave's left foot. He lurched forward, almost falling, regaining his balance at the last moment. "Hey," said Dave for the second time. He's hopping along the treadmill on his right foot now, pulling with the left, but his left foot won't come, and it's not because someone's grabbed it. It's because both ends of that overlong hockey lace were disappearing into the bowels of the machine. Dave's shoelace was wrapping itself around the treadmill rollers, and he couldn't pull it loose. He was trapped. And then the voice from the machine was saying, in 3, 2, 1, and there was a flourish of trumpets. Maybe it was the theme from Rocky, and the treadmill began to rise up in the air. Dave was running uphill now, hopping, actually. His heart pounding, his leg pumping, his mind racing. Just who was this Brendan? And why on earth would he choose to do this to himself? And then Dave felt a wave of relief. There was a stop button. It was right in front of him, as plain as day. He smiled and he reached out and he pressed it, and nothing happened. Which is what happens when you soak a solid-state circuit board in coffee. But Dave didn't know that. And that's not all he didn't know. He didn't know, for instance, that the mysterious Brendan, who had carelessly left his computer chip in training preferences, was training for the Boston Marathon. And that Dave was about to re-experience Brendan's last training session, a simulated 23-kilometer run through the Adirondack Mountains. All Dave knew was that he was literally running for his life. He was running the Boston Marathon with his left foot in a leg hold trap. And as he hopped along, he was staring right at a big poster on the wall in front of him. "Start out slowly," said the poster. "Talk to your doctor before exercising." Dave pounded along for 12 long minutes until he couldn't pound anymore, and then he managed to hop his right foot onto the side platform. He had to leave his left foot behind. And he stood there on the side of this machine, his free foot on the platform on the side, and his trapped foot flipping and flopping like Brian Mulrooney with a bag full of money. Desperate times. And desperate times require desperate measures. So Dave began to bend over slowly. He bent down until he was almost squatting. And he stared at that treadmill going round and around, and he reached out with both his hands, and he grabbed it. He actually managed to stop it for an instant. Then there was a bang, and he was catapulted back onto the belt. Sadly, he was facing the wrong way. He was running backwards now, up an Adirondack mountain faster than he'd ever run forwards in his life. And then the voice on the machine said, "Let's take it up a notch, Brendan." And that is when the fitness room door opened. "In the name of God," croaked Dave, "help me." And then he looked over his shoulder to see who had come in. And he looked right into the eyes of the kid from the swimming pool. "The plug," gasped Dave, "pull the plug." And the kid from the swimming pool walked right over to him. And he looked right into his eyes and he said, "You know what? You are old enough to know better." And he turned around and he walked right out of the room. Dave kept hopping for another 10 minutes. And during those 10 minutes, he made his peace with God and the fates. He should have guessed he was going to die like this. At any moment, he was going to fall over from exhaustion. Not quite the dignified exit he had imagined. Probably his whole body would get sucked into the roller. Probably he'd get flattened like some sort of cartoon character. That's what he was thinking anyway when the fitness room door opened again. And someone said, "Hey man, I think I left my chip in your machine." Dave tried to summon up as much dignity as he could. "Whatever," said Dave. "I was just finishing. It's all yours." And Brendan, maybe 25, 27, certainly not 30, walked across the room and he reached out and he flipped up a plastic cover and he removed his chip. And the machine stopped abruptly, just like that. Unfortunately, Dave kept running. It was barely 9:30 when he limped back into his bedroom. Morley was sitting on the bed. She was surrounded by tourist brochures. She looked up when she saw him and smiled and said, "Hey, Did you know we're in the Adirondacks? There's some wonderful hikes around here. I was thinking we could have breakfast and go for a hike. Thank you.